This year I want to take the Land Cruiser on some long trips, and one of the areas I need to take care of besides this door handle is interior upgrades and creature comforts, and today we'll be starting with the sound system. I've been using this pill speaker as my entire sound system in this Land Cruiser because the current head unit has a short and it keeps popping the fuse, which I haven't had time to diagnose yet. And its time is up. We're ripping it out today. We're not going to fix it. We're just going to be upgrading the whole system and installing this new ATOTO head unit, and we're going to try to stuff some larger speakers in there today. We have been getting absolutely dumped on with snow here in the last couple days in southwest Idaho. We've got over a foot of snow in 2 days, and I've been trying to come out here and make this video, but my entire life has just been shoveling and moving snow. In preparation for the next storm, which is on Wednesday, where we're supposed to see even more snow. So of course we don't want that to just keep on stacking up and packing, so that's what I've been doing. But today it finally stopped and I'm out here and ready to make this video. So I'm not a huge car audio guy, but of course I do want to have sound in the Land Cruiser, and right now we're just using an old JBL pill speaker, and yeah, I don't want to be stuck with that forever. So we have a nice new ATOTO head unit going in there to upgrade the existing one that has a short, and I'm hoping that the wiring is easy and they didn't just cut the factory splice in there, which, you know, I'm kind of thinking that might be the case because there is a short, but hopefully when we tear that all apart, it's just a very easy install. And we're also going to be installing the 4 Rockford Fosgate speakers, keeping it very, very basic, just a speaker in each door. So let's go ahead and get to unboxing and getting everything installed. Alright, so we're gonna get started on removing the old deck, and we gotta take off all this trim right here. I did not intend on really going, you know, deep into the details on this video, but I did the speaker on the passenger front door just as a teaser, I guess, and I cannot believe how hard it is to install speakers on this Land Cruiser. So I'm gonna go in a little bit more depth than normal. Anyway, to remove this, I believe there's some screws under this ashtray that I just removed, and then 1 or 2 along the bottom side of the dash here. And I think this whole trim piece should come right off. Looks like there's only 4 screws that hold this panel on, so there's 3 in the ashtray mount alone. There's 1 on either side and then 1 up top right here. And then there's 1 under the dash on this side as well that hold this whole entire interior panel to whatever bracketry's behind it. And to get this thing off, we're just gonna like pull it like this at the same time as pulling it away from this corner up here by the gauge cluster, and it should release the tabs that hold this up here. Yeah, it's already popping away. Maybe just push the vents away, trying not to crack it. The plastic in this truck is so brittle and everything just explodes on contact, so we're trying not to do that today. Oh yeah, this is coming right out. All right. And all the wires on the back of this thing too, we have to unplug.
the trim is removed, and I was pretty scared the whole time because when I say the plastic is brittle in this truck, I mean the plastic is brittle in this truck. It just absolutely falls apart. Every time you touch it, it just explodes. So I was really surprised that I was able to pull this entire thing out without any issues. There's only one thing that broke, and it's this little, I don't know what you want to call this, a screw clip or whatever that goes into the recessed area, like that one right there. The one on the other side just broke, and that's not really a big deal when I was expecting every single clip to snap off. So there's a ton of connectors back here. We have the heater, the ECT, the rear heater, and all these other controls for the antenna and the cigarette lighter and everything else. And it spans across the dash this way to your security system and all your other switches over here for like the mirrors and stuff. So the security plug and the rear heater plug are interesting. They're kind of hard to get off, but you just pry it up and you pull it off of it. At least that's the way that only way I could get that thing off of there. You know, it worked. So at this point, we're ready to pull out the existing radio and install the new one. I did see a harness back there that looks like maybe it was installed with some care. So hopefully when we pull this thing out, it's just spliced into the adapter harness instead of directly into the factory harness. Oh, thank God, it is not cut into the original harness. We have an adapter harness. Oh, I was so worried about that. This is gonna make it so much easier to install. For those that don't know, the harness adapter that I'm talking about that I was really excited to see is this guy right here. And basically what this does is it splices into the stereo harness and it gives you plugs to connect to your existing car, whether it be a Toyota or Chevrolet or anything, you can buy it for your car. And it just plugs into the factory harness right here, so it's a plug and play. What a lot of people do, and well, not a lot of people, but what a lot of people that don't know what they're doing do, is they splice into the existing harness. If not, just cut that plug right off and then wire it into the radio harness here. So since this one does have a short, I was worried that we would run into, you know, messed up wiring back here, but it looks like we're good. Now that could also be a bad thing. We still do have a short. Hopefully it lives in here and not in here. But yeah, we're basically ready to start mounting up that new stereo and get it installed. I just got the brackets installed on the ATOTO unit right here because of course I want to be sure that it fits before I move forward with the install. Now it did say in the instructions clearly that if you have a Toyota, you might have to use the OEM brackets, and that's exactly what we had to do. As you can see, those are OEM brackets. So I just ripped those right off of the old stereo right here, installed them on the new one, and now we're good to go. So I'm going to make sure this fits in there, and then we'll move forward with the rest of the installation. Well, I just got the radio all bolted up and I'm looking at the interior trim piece that goes over all this, and I found what has to be the most ridiculously ironic spot for a microphone. So I wasn't going to install the microphone, but let me show you what I just found. If this is not a sign that I'm supposed to install this microphone, I don't know what is. I'm looking at this trim piece about to install it, and I look right there and I'm thinking to myself, what is that used for? Because that sure does look perfect for a microphone. And it looks like it could accept, you know, a switch or something, maybe a speaker of some sort in a different application, because there is that little piece right there for the trim. So I take this this microphone and I shoved it into that hole, and I was thinking, I have to install this thing. I just have to install it because it's perfect. Look, we got the microphone right there. It's pointing towards the driver. All we gotta do is take the radio back out and plug this thing in, and we'll be able to route this microphone. I don't think anything will get in the way, so we're gonna go for it. So as you can see, the dash trim was contacting the corner of the stereo right there, but with a little filing, I was able to get it to fit perfectly, and I did have to take off the trim ring that comes with it, but that's an optional piece anyway, so it all worked out. Also, remember the short I was having? Well, the short was caused by the factory amp, and I'm gonna bypass this anyway, so we were able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. Just unplug it and bypass it. Let's take a moment to talk about the stereo real quick. So this is the ATOTO A6. It's a 7-inch double din unit, and the reason why I chose this over something like their 10-inch model is because this one fits perfectly in the dash, as you can see here. The 10-inch one fits into the same double din area, but then it pops out so the screen has the room to fit, so it ends up being proud of the dash, and I didn't want it to cover any of my switches or any places where I might install additional switches in the future, so this one was perfect for me. Now, these things are basically just a tablet. This one right here is running Android, and it's going to have all those expected Android functionalities built into it. So you'll be able to navigate your file system and also have the ability to upload any files to the file system. So behind the dash right here, I have the phone link, but I also have a connector for an external storage drive, and you can upload custom wallpapers and do anything you want to customize this system. I do plan to make a nice cover for this. I'm going to use a switch blank like this guy right here, and we're gonna install it and have a nice little USB outlet in the dash. So anyway, there's also support for a backup camera, navigation, and it also has wireless CarPlay. They call it CarLink, but it's CarPlay, and a lot of new cars don't even have wireless CarPlay, so this is pretty nice to have. And this will connect just like you would expect it to. You can use all the apps on your phone, and it supports Android Auto as well. Of course, you can rearrange all the apps to your liking, just like you would expect on your tablet or phone. You can also do cool things like watch YouTube, and it also supports Wi-Fi and Bluetooth tethering. However, I'll mostly be using this for CarPlay navigation and music, but it's nice to have those features available as well. I did install everything except for these RCA things, which I believe are used for an amp, and this harness here is used for attaching additional Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antennas, which the Land Cruiser of course doesn't have. And then they do have this GPS module here, which I also didn't install because I just don't need it, but they do have a tracking app called TrackHU, which can provide real-time location monitoring. So I guess if you're in a high crime area or have teens driving the car or something, it could be appealing, but it's not for me. Now we're moving on to the speaker install, and I'm going to be tackling the rears first because they're way easier to do than the fronts. Both will require modification to install basically any aftermarket speaker, and this is mainly due to speaker depth and clearance issues with the window hardware. Now, with these old vehicles, you always run into some other issue that turns your 30-minute install into 12 hours, like door cards falling apart, clips and interior pieces breaking, or in my case, finding other issues like water in your door, the window falling off the track randomly, and just things that add a lot of time. But hey, things don't typically go as planned around here. So you can see here just how shallow the 4-inch factory speaker is compared to this aftermarket one, and the weird plastic mount that it lives in. We're gonna have to modify that mount in order to fit the aftermarket speaker into it. Now, this wouldn't be necessary if we were installing a larger speaker with a spacer that just went through the door card, but if we plan to use the same size speaker, we might as well get this to fit as best as we possibly can. If I were to do this all over again though, I would probably just install a larger speaker because I don't know if the effort is worth the sound quality that a 4-inch speaker produces. With the factory speaker removed from the mount, now I'm cutting the back of the cage or whatever you want to call it so the new speaker can fit, since it has a deeper mounting depth and won't fit otherwise. But now that it does fit, I have to find a way to fasten it to the mount, and that's where YouTube and forum boards save the day. Once again, I'm using my snips to cut off 2 of the 4 tabs on this speaker and then shaping the other 2 into tabs that will fold over and screw into the side of the mount. And just for good measure, adding double-sided tape around the speaker before securing it with the screws. This mimics the way that the factory speaker was installed. If you remember, it was glued to that plastic mount. So this is doing the exact same thing, just with the addition of 2 mounting tabs. The reassembly process is of course the reverse of the disassembly process, and now we have a solid fit, and the factory grill still fits as a bonus, though to be honest, I wasn't super concerned about that. So this is the front speaker that we have right here, and I had mentioned it's a little bit harder to install in the rear, and the main reason is because look how weird this design is. It has this inverted cone right here, and the mounting depth on this thing is about 1 inch, not much more, maybe less. So fitting aftermarket speakers into the Land Cruiser is challenging. Not to mention, this is only a 5 1/4 inch speaker, and we're trying to stuff a 6 1/2 inch speaker in there. So you may be wondering, why don't you just leave the 5 1/4 inch speaker in there instead of trying to replace it with the 6 1/2 inch if what it takes is a 5 1/4? Well, the first thing I would say is this is a channel where we modify things and tear it apart. So obviously we have to try to fit something in there that doesn't actually fit. And the second reason is because it's just not that simple, actually. Let me take you over here to my collection of speakers that I've had to buy for this project and show you why. All right, so I realized I never mentioned why this speaker is so shallow, and it's because the window hardware is so close behind the door panel that they had to make it this way. So that is why we are so restricted in what speakers that we use. Now, we could use a spacer, but there's an area on the door that's recessed in the actual metal that kind of prevents you from running any spacer that you would buy. So you would have to custom make something, which isn't the biggest deal, but if we're gonna go that far, we might as well just install a larger speaker. So we have the factory 5 1/4 inch speaker right here. We have the Rockford Fosgate 5 1/4, and then the speaker that I had originally intended to use, the Rockford Fosgate 6 1/2. Now, one thing you're gonna notice is the mounting depth between these 3 speakers increases dramatically as the speakers change. And it's not worth it to me to just come up with a spacer to run a 5 1/4 inch, so we're gonna go with the 6 1/2, but the issue with the 6 1/2 is the same issue with the spacers. It doesn't fit the recessed area of the door. I don't wanna cut up my door metal, so what I'd have to do is make a spacer for this, which I might do in the future, but for right now, for this video, what I decided to do was skip out on the Rockford Fosgates and install these Pioneers. Now, these Pioneers are a G1620F, I believe. I'll put the part number on the screen if that was wrong. And these are labeled as a 6 1/2 inch speaker, but they have mounting holes for a 5 1/4, and they're kind of more like a 6. If I hold it next to the Fosgate right here, you can see it's a lot smaller. So these actually fit into the recessed area of the door metal, and they're not the deepest speaker either. They're pretty shallow, so we only have to space it out a little bit and do very little modifications to get it to fit. And I'll go ahead and show you how we're gonna do that. The stock speaker fits the door perfectly, so I'm just gonna salvage it and repurpose it as a spacer. I'm gonna cut away the metal from the back of the speaker so that the new speaker can fit through this speaker, and then flip it over and cut off the black plastic protective grill from the front of the speaker and use that as the mounting surface for the new speaker. So as you can see, we were able to repurpose that old speaker and turn it into about a 3/16 inch spacer for that new speaker. And you can see here, I just cut everything off of it and then I ground it flat so the speaker could sit on there. And this back part doesn't have to be perfect because it'll sit right inside that door recession. So this is gonna work great. On the other side, I don't know why, but I tried prying off that black piece and basically ended up only using the metal for the spacer. So you can see here, it just snapped right off. So if you're doing this on a Land Cruiser, really recommend just leaving everything together. Don't try to pry it apart. Just cut the speaker out of it, use it as a spacer. You could probably also, instead of using either of these, just use weather stripping or something as a spacer, but This is the easiest way to do it, and it's free. So with this done, now we can mount the speaker in the door and get everything back together. I'm using double-sided tape on the back of my spacer just to hold it to the door so I don't have to fight with it when I reinstall everything. And another thing we have to do is cut the ears off the speaker. Remember I said it's not a real 6.5-inch speaker? Well, it does have 6.5-inch mounts, and that won't fit in the door, so we're gonna snip them off. Additionally, the speaker hole in the door itself needs to be clearanced, so I cut away most of that with a razor blade, and now I'm cleaning it up with a file. These old cars have Masonite door cards, and over time the slots for the retaining clips can fall apart and the retaining clips can get ripped out of the back of them and they just don't stay anymore. And I don't remember where I learned this, but you can use thin CA glue to basically wick into the material, and it hardens and re-strengthens it, and it fixes those holes on these doors. So that's something you can do as a preemptive approach or when they do fail, and that's what I'm doing here. All right, well, we're done. The head unit's installed, all the speakers are installed, we got everything working, and now it is time to test these things out and see how they sound. So keep in mind, I can't use anything that we actually listen to in real life because of YouTube and their monetization policy, but I have this royalty-free music, so that's what we're gonna listen to. So let's go ahead and check out Supernova. Actually sounds pretty good.
Well, I don't know if that last clip actually demonstrated what the system sounds like, but if I had to grade it, I would say that it sounds a little bit better than a new car that doesn't have a premium sound system in it. And that's pretty good considering the front speakers were $30 for the pair and the rear were $60 for the pair. And I was actually waiting on cheaper speakers for the rear, but they didn't show up in time for this video. So the front speakers were $15 each and the rear speakers were $30 each. So it's not like we have some big investment into this project to get pretty good sound. We're gonna start focusing on the interior and quality of life aspects of this Land Cruiser. Now, I have some ideas of things that I wanna do, but let me know what you wanna see me do in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and hey, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.